A little boy in West Allis is forever damaged because of what happened to him shortly after he was born.
New at 10, 12 News' Joyce Carbasiak joins us with a personal story of remorse and recovery.
Kathy Toya, it's a story that puts a face on a problem that's on the rise in southeastern Wisconsin.
Okay. Am I the good guys?
Yeah.
Though he's only 8, Evan Coleman has a pretty good idea of what he wants to be when he grows up.
Do news.
You want to do the news?
Not reporting, but taking the pictures.
And the important thing to have a battery.
Interesting, because the pictures from his own life tell such a compelling story. Like this shot, taken the day before his life changed forever.
I did a horrible, unforgivable thing.
This is Evan's father, who wants his face hidden.
You know, I'm obviously ashamed of it. Who wouldn't be?
Evan's dad was caring for him that day in 2001 when he says Evan's constant crying pushed him over the edge.
I lost it, and I picked him up and I shook him, I think 2 or 3 times, and kind of tossed him into his crib, and that's when I think he hit his head on the railing of the crib. As soon as I did it, I couldn't believe, you know, what had happened, what I had done.
He drove his son to Children's Hospital. Evan's mother, who had been at work, rushed to be with them.
I remember walking into the room, and Evan was laying there in a little bed, and his eyes are black and blue, and he had cuts all over his face. He looked like the life was pretty much sucked out of him. And I looked at him and I said, I will find who did this to you, and they will pay.
She didn't have to look far. While he denied it at first,
I was so ashamed of myself, I couldn't bring myself to say it.
within hours, Evan's dad confessed.
All of his ribs were fractured. He had fractured arms and fractured legs. So he literally was beaten from head to toe, and this is a 3-month-old baby.
I was a pretty bad alcoholic at the time, and I had the temper to go with it.
Had you been drinking when it happened?
No, I was sober, which is why I couldn't believe, you know, I was stone sober, and I had just done this to my son. I couldn't believe it.
Jenny couldn't believe that not only did Evan's dad do this to him, he apparently had hurt Evan before.
His arm fractures were healing injuries. There were some old rib fractures that were at least a month old.
Evan's father spent 7 years in prison. His son's sentence will last much longer.
He now has epilepsy. So he's been hospitalized 4 or 5 times for seizures. His behavior, his social skills, he's 8 years old, and his social skills are about 4-year-old level.
Come on. I'm a camera. Do all right? Okay. Say all right. All right.
Jenny says a portion of Evan's brain, the part that regulates reasoning and emotion, is permanently damaged. So Evan goes into rages and tantrums, and he's developmentally delayed.
I actually had to put him into a psychiatric hospital this year, and that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do.
Many of these babies die. About a quarter of them die. About a third to a half of them who survive have devastating injuries.
Dr. Lynn Sheets says Children's Hospital last year saw 30 cases of abusive head trauma, a record. With 9 so far this year, there's fear that record will be broken.
When a baby's crying and you've met all of their needs, if you start feeling frustrated or angry or inadequate, walk away. Put the baby down safely and walk away.
Evan's dad got out of prison this past December.
I'd spent the majority of my incarceration depressed and absolutely hating myself for the things that I had done.
A court order prevents him from having contact with his son.
You know, I hope that someday he can forgive me. I wouldn't expect him to, and I don't expect Jenny to, that's for sure.
But they both wanted to let people know what shaking a baby can do to a family and to a child.
He had so much potential, And a lot of that potential is gone because he's now disabled.
I just want people to know that it can happen to anyone, you know, if you let the stress go on long enough. I don't want to see it happen to anyone else.
A moment's rage
Batter up. Batter up.
with a lifetime of consequences.
Yeah. Home.
Evan will be on medication for the rest of his life. Currently, his regimen is for seizures, attention deficit disorder, and psychiatric problems.
Does Evan realize what happened to him?
He does. About a year ago, his mother told him how he was hurt, and she says Evan is now afraid of his father. The court order separating them will stay in effect for 6 more years.
It's remarkable that they wanted to tell their story.
It is something, isn't it? Both believe that if the long-term consequences of shaking or abusing a baby are shared, people will think twice before letting their frustration get the best of them. As that doctor said, put the baby in a safe place, walk away, and call for help. Don't let that stress overwhelm you.